BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Friday, another Cooper Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Fridays this year, I've been talking to you guys about D.B. Cooper, the man responsible for the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. aviation history. And in this episode, I will be examining Robert Richard Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect. He is the suspect of Ross Richardson, the author of the book Still Missing. And I have a standalone episode about Ross Richardson's observations that do not include a specific suspect, and you can find that on this channel called D.B. Cooper Still Missing Full Analysis. And that was done by design, because I have found that there are two specific questions that we get with almost every D.B. Cooper suspect. Number one was this person D.B. Cooper or not? And the other one is, are there other observations about the case or about other cases that could be connected, or even just observations about the D.B. Cooper mystery that are not purely related to a single suspect. So if you'd like to hear my episode on Ross Richardson's observations outside of Robert Richard Lepsy, then I invite you to check that out. But for now, I'll get to the heart and soul of this episode. And Robert Richard Lepsy was born in 1936. He would have been 35 years old at the time of the D.B. Cooper skyjacking, 35 or 36, because the D.B. Cooper skyjacking took place in 1971 on Thanksgiving Eve, November 24th of that year. And there's actually a page over on the Charlie Project about Robert Richard Lepsy, and other than that, I will be mostly citing Ross Richardson's book Still Missing as a source. But firstly, I should say that Robert Richard Lepsy was known as Richie to his family and Dick to his friends, so mostly I'll be referring to him as Dick Lepsy in this episode here. And his page on the Charlie Project begins by saying that Dick Lepsy went missing on October 29th of 1969 from Grayling, Michigan. He was a male, age 33 years old at the time, white Caucasian. He was estimated to have been 5 feet 10 inches tall to 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I think that's a very big range. I mean, this is a lot of height on a person. 4 inches is a lot of height to miss on a person. For example, somebody who's 5'10" won't normally be mistaken for being 6'2". He was estimated to have been 180 and 1 to 190 pounds. He was last seen wearing a white shirt, black pants, a black tie, a belt, black loafers, and a watch. He had black hair, brown eyes. Lepsy was balding. He had a surgical scar from a cyst that was removed, and his 2 front teeth were crooked. And as previously stated, his nickname was Dick to his friends. So immediately I can see that there are some similarities to D.B. Cooper. And if you look at other sources and news articles that talk about Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect, they mostly state that Dick Lepsy was someone who matched the physical description, and he went missing 2 years before the skyjacking. There was a comment that came in on one of these Cooper Friday episodes where somebody simply asked, well, if D.B. Cooper hasn't been identified, then were there any missing persons at the time or in the area that matched the description that could have been investigated? And this guy is not from 1971, but this story is from 1969. Now, is it from the Seattle, Oregon, Washington State area? No, he was from Michigan. But there's another factor. As stated, Dick Lepsy has gone missing. No one has seen him since 1969. So let's look at the Charlie Project's page for the disappearance. Dick Lepsy was last seen leaving his workplace in Grayling, Michigan at 1:30 p.m. on October 29th of 1969. He was a manager at Glenn's Market, a grocery store. He left for his lunch break and never came back. During his break, he called his wife and said that he was going for a ride. He took no personal belongings with him, and he has never been seen or heard from again. And from reading Ross Richardson's book, I believe that there was another phone call that was made. Not only did he call his wife on his lunch break, but he also called the store, Glenn's Market, where he worked. And he stated that he would not be coming back for the rest of the day. But that's all anybody knew about. And to anyone that has actually been interviewed or discussed in the story, it was a completely unforeseen departure, and it surprised everyone. 3 days later, Lepsy's vehicle was found abandoned in the parking lot of Cherry Capital Airport in Traverse City, Michigan. The doors were unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition, and there was a half pack of cigarettes sitting on the dashboard. Now, this is something that becomes very important because it raises a lot of questions. In the book Still Missing, Dick Lepsy is referred to as a man that no one ever saw get drunk, but he was reported to have been a regular chain smoker, and this just simply shocked his family that he left behind the half pack of cigarettes. Now, he smoked Chesterfield King cigarettes, and we know that D.B. Cooper smoked Raleigh cigarettes, but this will tie into some things about D.B. Cooper's activities while he was on the plane. D.B. Cooper boarded a plane under the name of Dan Cooper. He carried a briefcase which had what appeared to have been a bomb, and he also ordered a bourbon and soda, but he didn't get overly drunk, and he also smoked 8 Raleigh cigarettes during the duration of the skyjacking. And some people point to that by saying that they don't think that D.B. Cooper was a regular smoker, because if he smoked only 8 cigarettes, that isn't necessarily what a regular smoker would do. And I think what I said in response to that was, well, that just means that he wasn't a chain smoker. Not everybody is just constantly going through cigarettes one after another. Well, it was reported that Dick Lepsy did, and I actually think that that is a strike against Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect, because I would expect that somebody whose family was just absolutely shocked to see and hear that he left behind a half pack of cigarettes are like, what? He never goes anywhere without cigarettes. He's just constantly smoking, and D.B. Cooper didn't do that. I think the only way that you can reconcile that type of observation is by saying that, well, maybe he started smoking less during the 2 years that he would have been missing. Now, this point about D.B. Cooper may not have been a regular drinker because he only ordered 1 bourbon and soda, that would actually fit somebody such as Dick Lepsy, because this just means that no one ever saw him drunk. Well, D.B. Cooper didn't get overly drunk, and as people have talked about in the comments section, this could be as simple as he's just ordering that because he's trying to look cool, he's trying to look fashionable. It's not exactly the James Bond complex, because James Bond likes different types of drinks as opposed to bourbon and 7-Up. But very similar, he was just trying to be some type of classy guy putting on a character. And there's a 2-part answer to this, because just because someone is a regular drinker does not mean they're going to have the lack of awareness to get shit-faced drunk when they're committing a skyjacking. I mean, some people do not tolerate alcohol too well. They can get drunk rather easily, and also somebody would not, maybe they didn't want to be completely smashed when they were going through with this. What if the bomb in D.B. Cooper's briefcase was real and this person just didn't want to be overly drunk when he's handling a bomb? Or how about handling things like parachutes? Now, some people can tolerate alcohol very well. Yesterday on Black Box Online Radio, I was talking to you guys about the book Homicide: The View from Inside the Yellow Tape by Cloyd Steiger, and he talks about being on a plane with a colleague, and Cloyd Steiger is approached by the stewardess, and she asks, do you guys want to drink anything? And he says, I'll have a coffee. And the guy next to him, his workmate, says, I'll have 4 screwdrivers, and he'll have 4 screwdrivers. And then that guy drinks all 8 of the screwdrivers himself. He just said 4 and 4 to make it look a little bit less obvious, and he didn't really get drunk at all. And some people have a very high tolerance for alcohol, and some people have a very low tolerance for alcohol. So if we're not going to discuss any particular suspect, I don't think there's any evidence to say that D.B. Cooper was a regular smoker, a regular drinker. I mean, a lot of it could be just things that are done in character, and also somebody who just wanted to be aware of his mind. If we are going to discuss a suspect, I think that the drinking thing would match up with Dick Lepsy, and I think the smoking thing would not. But what do you think about D.B. Cooper's behavior on the plane? Dick Lepsy was a husband and father. He left behind 4 children, and the authorities have concluded that he left on his own accord and made little effort to find him. He was declared legally dead in 1976, and the case remains unsolved. In addition to reading Ross Richardson's book and in reading about his observations of Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect, I also listened to his take on the subject in an interview on the Cooper Vortex hosted by Darren Schaefer, and it was an excellent interview. He talks about a lot of things, and I can tell that Ross Richardson is somebody who pays a lot of attention, that he's very curious, and he really wants to know and understand what people are doing and how people think. But I also wanted to point out that he doesn't seem completely sold on Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect. In his book, Still Missing, it begins by talking about how he's not saying that this guy is D.B. Cooper. He's not saying that he has solved the case and he's identified D.B. Cooper. What he is saying is that Dick Lepsy deserves more consideration as a D.B. Cooper suspect, and the biggest reasons are facial similarities to the composite sketches, as well as he wore the same type of clothes that D.B. Cooper wore, and there's another element to the story, and that is that Dick Lepsy went missing, and he took $2,500 from his store, Glen Market. More or less, he stole it. He stole that money. His car was found at the airport, and he was never seen from again. Now, the only things that Ross Richardson was able to obtain about where he may have gone was by conducting some interviews, and it appears that he may have gone to Mexico. There was a rumor even that he knew a woman that he went to Mexico with, but Ross Richardson was unable to substantiate that. So here's the theory. At last we are getting to the full package theory. This guy, Dick Lepsy, takes $2,500 from the safe at Glen's Market in Michigan. He drives to the airport, he calls his wife, he calls the store, says, I'm not coming back for a while, I'm going for a drive, and then he gets on a plane, and he flies to Mexico. He lives in Mexico for 2 years on the $2,500, which would have been a lot more money at the time, plus a lower cost of living, but then that starts to run out. And maybe everything has fizzled out. And I think that Ross Richardson has composed a rather interesting element to his D.B. Cooper theory, and I hope that I've understood and I'm articulating it the way that he would. And that is that, okay, so he's almost completely out of money. So he stages the skyjacking in somewhat of a twofold manner. One way is the concept of obtaining a ransom money. When D.B. Cooper was on the plane, he showed the bomb and said that he was demanding $200,000 and 4 parachutes. But somebody like Dick Lepsy didn't appear to have any type of parachuting background, any type of skydiving background. Maybe this wasn't truly about the money, but this was a suicide plot. Somebody who has reached the end of his life, and as previously stated, his resources have fizzled out. His new plan to start a new life in Mexico didn't exactly work out, so he staged the skyjacking as a way to go out in a blaze of glory, jumped out over the Pacific Northwest, and maybe he couldn't even have opened the parachute, and that he crash-landed in the Columbia River or the Lewis River. And the water moved D.B. Cooper's body around for a while. 3 bundles of the bills came out, and Ross Richardson seems very adamant that they removed to Tina Bar, that the 3 bundles of $20 bills that were found in 1980 from the D.B. Cooper heist at Tina Bar, Ross Richardson believes that that came from the 1974 dredge, when the river was dredged and that the sediments were just piled over, meaning that they could have been in the Columbia River for a very long time, and in 1974 they were moved to Tina Bar, and they were somewhat buried, and they were just decomposing because of the elements, and he pretty much said that was the only explanation. Now, other people have disputed that, saying that the dredge of the 74 River shouldn't have moved the bills to that specific point. They think that the money was buried at Tina Bar, and it's just an additional part of the mystery, and I confess, a very confusing part of the mystery. But that would more or less be the full package theory, that Dick Lepsy jumped out of the plane in 1971, wasn't able to open the parachute, and that he landed, and just his remains have never been found. The briefcase and the bag of money and the parachutes would have all been secured to his body. Maybe he couldn't even get the parachute open, and maybe he wasn't even truly intending to. Perhaps it was somewhat of a suicide mission, where he didn't necessarily care if he lived or died, and it would maybe a risk-taking mission rather than a suicide mission, because if he had survived, he could have just gone to Mexico and exchanged the money and disappeared into the Sonoran Desert or whatever he chose to do. But what do you think about that? And what do you think about the concept of D.B. Cooper not surviving the jump? Firstly, I have to give some credit to Ross Richardson for proposing a suspect and tying this into a theory. where D.B. Cooper did not survive. With most of the suspects that I've discussed here on Cooper Friday, they are all people who have, I really do think this, all of the suspects are people who would have had to have survived the jump, and their explanations about how and why they would have survived and where they would have gone after the skyjacking. But Ross Richardson is proposing one that may have died during the jump. And if there are any other D.B. Cooper suspects that you would like to hear about, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below. You can also hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And you can go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/blackboxonlineradio allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And not only did Ross Richardson appear on the Cooper Vortex, I was also recently a guest on the program, and I was interviewed by Darren Schaefer, and he does a great job with those interviews, and you can find that under the name of D.B. Cooper's Black Box, with me, Ned DeHaan, on Darren Schaefer's channel for the show, The Cooper Vortex. And I also invite you to like and subscribe over to his channel as well. Now, as I said, when I first picked up Ross Richardson's book, and I was going through the intro, he has that line in there about how he's not saying that Dick Lepsy was D.B. Cooper, he just says he's worthy of consideration. When I read stuff like that, I get very skeptical. Doesn't mean the person's observations are completely wrong, it just pushes me back a little. I have to take a step back and just think, now wait a second. If you aren't completely convinced that this guy is D.B. Cooper, how are you going to convince me that he was D.B. Cooper? If you're just going to say that he's worthy of consideration, I think every suspect that I've talked about here on Cooper Friday is worthy of consideration. And when someone isn't extremely attached to their own theory, there's some room for doubt. Now, I completely understand why somebody would want to propose a suspect or person of interest. We really should say that Dick Lepsy is a person of interest for Ross Richardson, and he's just saying, well, this guy seems to match up with some things about D.B. Cooper. I'm kind of curious about where this is going to go, so I'm going to investigate further. Sure, and also asking other people to investigate further. I think that all of those things are reasonable, but, you could say that about so many other suspects. I just find it a lot more compelling and engaging when someone has more or less some stronger beliefs and opinions and statements about why they think their suspect was D.B. Cooper, because most of the people that I've talked about on Cooper Friday who are proposing suspects are just like gung-ho. This person was D.B. Cooper 100%, or even if it's not 100%, 97%, 95%, they are way more adamant that their suspect was D.B. Cooper. And when someone gives this wavering response, I'm not saying he's the guy, we just need to look at him a little bit more and see what we find. That gives me some cause for doubt. But what about you? Does that type of approach give you any cause for doubt, or do you think that that's totally normal to propose a person of interest, even if you are not completely sold on them? And it's not so much that someone's proposing a person of interest, I take that back. It's that he chose to include this person in a book about missing persons cases and disappearances, Still Missing by Ross Richardson, which I do recommend. It's an excellent book. And it's an excellent book, but I'll talk about that in a second just to finish the thought. He included this in a book, but he doesn't seem like he has completely endorsed the theory himself. But the reason why I just said it was an excellent book was Ross Richardson is curious about human behavior. He makes observations about human behavior, but not the way that a psychologist does, the way that a truth seeker does, where conventional psychology is limited by all types of academic and bureaucratic frameworks, and it has to be approached in a very specific way. Sometimes people just want to know what's actually happening, what's going on with people, why are people doing what they're doing, and they're not just trying to compartmentalize human behavior into a set of labels and putting everybody into these little boxes and saying this is what human behavior is. They're trying to make their own observations, give their honest responses to what they think about the actions and behaviors of other people. And I noticed that a lot from Ross Richardson, especially when I was listening to the interview that he did on the Cooper Vortex, because he talked about the concept of stolen valor, and that is when people begin to make these types of far-out observations in the true crime world where they're just connecting dot after dot. They're just looking at how their D.B. Cooper suspect may have also been somebody like the Zodiac Killer, or may have also been somebody who was working with the CIA or the FBI as a top secret informant, and then they just begin connecting the dots. And then they put their findings into a book, and if it doesn't give you enough dopamine hits to be the person who connects the dots, putting your name in a book, putting your name on a book even, will be even more. And then they get mentioned on television, local television, and then national television. And it's just a giant process. But if some people are just messing around and doing this in an impractical way, then he referred to that as a form of stolen valor, because they're just rearranging information to get some type of visually pleasing result to them. And it's called stolen valor because they're not actually investigating at that point. They are just looking at real pieces of information and making fictitious connections among those pieces of information. And you can hear more about this in Ross Richardson's interview on the Cooper Vortex, and he's also done one with House of Mystery, which I will be listening to very shortly. But as far as some other aspects of the D.B. Cooper case, I want to take a step back from Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect. Firstly, you tell me everything you think about this guy. And there was another episode of the Cooper Vortex that I was listening to, and it was Darren's interview with Harriet Suchet, who has a D.B. Cooper suspect named Jack Torrance, and she would be perhaps someone that Ross Richardson was talking about, accusing her suspect Jack Torrance of committing a host of other crimes, including the Zodiac murders. And she made a statement that she said that D.B. Cooper did not have a real bomb when he got on the plane. D.B. Cooper did not have a real bomb because her suspect, Jack Torrance, wouldn't have been stupid enough to carry a real bomb. Wait a second. She's only saying that because she has chosen a suspect and she has a theory about how Jack Torrance was some type of MK Ultra government operative, something to that effect, working with people like the CIA. I don't even really know, and I don't even really care because I think it's too far out. And I played a clip of Harriet's interview on Zodiac Monday, where I thought that she was being very insulting to the murder victims in the Zodiac Killer mystery, and very praiseworthy to the killers, for lack of a better term. So I do not think highly of her observations at all. But here's one that I want to challenge on the merits. It is not impossible for D.B. Cooper to have had a bomb when he was on the plane. The briefcase did not have to contain a dud. And how and why would that take place? What about somebody like Dick Lepsy? What about this theory that has been composed by Ross Richardson, that he didn't care if he lived or died? He may have even done this as somewhat of a suicide mission, expecting that he wasn't going to survive the jump if he had no skydiving experience, jumping into the night, into clouds, into inclement weather, over the Pacific Northwest, and maybe he landed in the Columbia River or the Lewis River and just nobody found the body. He was moved and dragged by the propeller of a boat, something to that effect. I mean, firstly, that's not impossible. And we have to bear in mind, even if somebody is gung-ho for their theory, that does not mean that they're 100% correct. I think Harriet Suchet is completely wrong. I don't think that Jack Torrance was D.B. Cooper. Sorry. But this also goes back to an interview that I heard with Ryan Burns on Planet X Filmworks, and he stated that D.B. Cooper may have been completely comfortable taking his own life. He may have been fine taking his own life, and after he jumped out of the plane that he was planning on detonating the bomb at some point, but he didn't take the lives of other people. Maybe he would have taken the lives of other people. Maybe this is somebody who wanted to go out not in a blaze of glory, but in a blaze of terrorism, because he wasn't afraid to live or die. So this whole concept of D.B. Cooper would not have been stupid enough to bring a real bomb onto the plane? No, absolutely not. That only works if you have assigned yourself to a particular theory. But you can always weigh in the comments section about what you think. Do you believe that the bomb that D.B. Cooper had was real or not? And I would love to read your comments. But let's give a nutshell recap of everything about Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect. And the first point is facial similarities to the composite sketch. Second point, he was regularly known to wear the same types of clothes that D.B. Cooper was wearing. Third point, D.B. Cooper has never been spotted again, and Dick Lepsy went missing in 1969. 1969, what a dark and terrible year. Goodness gracious, so many crazy things happened in 1969. But then, we also have, this guy has not been sighted anywhere, may have gone to Mexico. All we know is that he had $2,500, or $2,500 was missing from the safe, but most likely he took it. What do you think about my statement that I think that the fact that he was a regular chain smoker and D.B. Cooper only smoked 8 cigarettes is a strike against Dick Lepsy as a D.B. Cooper suspect? And if I can be very honest with you, I think the only strong points is that this guy's whereabouts were unaccounted for, and that he matches some of the physical descriptions. Other than that, I'm not really seeing anything that truly connects him to the D.B. Cooper case. But that's my take on the subject. I would love to have you guys weigh in the comment section down below. But I did say something about how Ross Richardson is very curious about human behavior. And I wanted to say this for the end because it's not exclusively D.B. Cooper related. He tells the story of Dick Lepsy's family and how they were receiving a life insurance payment because he was gone for a certain period of time, so he was legally declared dead. And the life insurance policy that he had out was for $10,000, and ultimately the family received $7,500. And one of the family members is approached by 2 investigators. This is all in the book Still Missing, mind you. And the way that they talk about it is, it appeared that one of the insurance investigators was trying to push buttons and trying to aggravate the person, and the other one was trying to pay attention and observe how they were responding to that. And we often have the good cop, bad cop dynamic, where it's the concept of when someone's being interrogated, one person is going to be really nice and one person is going to be really mean. I think Ross Richardson describes something that happens way more frequently. Somebody is trying to provoke, aggravate, or get particular reactions out of people, and the other person is not just trying to be good and nice. They are observing, recording, documenting, or remembering how they respond to these aggravations. And you can even think about this in your own personal life when you've known groups of 2 people, even outside of the world of professional environments. But I think that Ross Richardson has a very good eye for detail, and as I said, I think he's very insightful. I think he makes a lot of good observations about why people do things the way they do. I'm just not convinced that Dick Lepsy was D.B. Cooper, and it doesn't appear that Ross Richardson is either. But if you would like to read about him as a D.B. Cooper suspect, you can read about Dick Lepsy in the book Still Missing by Ross Richardson, and there's also a standalone section just discussing the facts of the D.B. Cooper case, and I also did a standalone episode for that, D.B. Cooper Still Missing Full Analysis, here on BBOWAR, and that will be all for me now. And anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is Ned DeHaan. There's also a page for Black Box Online Radio on Facebook, and you can get Black Box Online Radio on TikTok and Spotify now, and even going over to BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram, and I'll see you over there. Until next time.